What's the creepiest, scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? Didn't see it but heard it. My friends and I got a cheap set of walkie-talkies from Walmart and were playing around with them in the middle of the day. There's a bit of silence as we're trying to figure out the volume, and out of nowhere there's a male voice saying "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday" that comes through all of our walkie-talkies, and it definitely sounds like it from one of those aircraft headsets. We try to answer back but there's no response. I called non-emergency but they said there weren't any reports of distressed aircraft or ships, and even if there were, they couldn't do anything about it. Alternatively, a couple months later I saw a plane with an engine on fire go over my campus, but apparently no one else did. Growing up, I had a friend named Adam. He was never able to come out during the day, only right before all of us kids had to go home for the evening. Adam lived a few houses over, in a house with an overgrown yard. I met his parents once. They were very strange, didn't smile, and obviously didn't want me either. I remember Adam telling me that he was sick. That's why he couldn't play that much. He was a small boy, pale with dark hair. Eventually, Adam stopped showing up altogether. And I eventually moved on, though I do remember going to his house a couple times to see if he could come play, and his dad just gave me this look before closing the door in my face. Later in life, I asked my sister if she remembered him. She doesn't, and according to my parents, that house was empty the entire time we lived there. I don't know who Adam was. I don't know why I so vividly remember him and his parents. As far as I can tell, he wasn't real, and yet I have perfect memories of him and his parents. When I was 7 or 8, I would have a reoccurring nightmare that one of my dolls came to life, played with me, and then would try to pull me into my closet with her. I'd follow her into the closet at first, but then she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet, and my heart would start to race. I don't know what it was about that door, but I knew something bad would happen if I went through it. I'd start to struggle and try to pull away, but the doll was too strong and would start pulling me through the door. At this point in the dream, I'd always wake up screaming. The worst part was I had night terrors, so sometimes I'd wake up standing next to my closet. Every night before bed, I'd make my parents make sure there wasn't a little door at the back of my closet. There never was. Anyway, I was talking to my mum the other day and this dream came up. I'm laughing about it and how ridiculously paranoid I was about dolls in that closet, but my mom gets really quiet. She tells me the creepy part of that dream wasn't the doll. It was the fact that there used to be a little door at the back of the closet, but when I was 1 year old, they remodeled the house and put a wall where the door used to be. There's no way I could have remembered that door, but years later, I kept dreaming about it. None of my friends believe this story, but I swear it's true. Okay, I know no one's gonna see this, but I gotta let it out of my chest. Anyways, around the time when I was 9, my mum and my stepdad decided to move to the apartment, while my brother stayed at my grandma's house. Which was cool, because at the apartment, in my and brother's room we had a bunk bed, and I could sleep on his top bed freely. So, the night came and I was sleeping well, until something very sudden woke me up. It wasn't any sound, nor touch, but rather feeling of something really bad did that. I tried to shake it off, but then suddenly I saw something light, in a shape of a head very close to my bed. I got confused but couldn't take my eyes out of the figure. So I stared at it for a very long time, probably an hour even. I just tend to focus on things way too much when I get confused by them, and by that time you could tell that my eyes got used to the darkness. I was able to see the figure even better. It had rather a flat skull, its jaw was rather unsymmetrical, and it had no eyes, no lips. I'm not very sure about the nose though. I knew I wasn't seeing things and there was really something in front of me and that I should call my parents, but I just couldn't help but stare. maybe even one more of the hours we spent looking at each other, until that flucker decided to fucking touch me with IT's cold ALSS hands. That's when I started screaming. My mom rushed to my room to check what's wrong, but the thing just disappeared. Even now my mum doesn't believe me on what I have told her, but I know the story I'm telling now is fucking real, and I'm hoping that that weird skeleton looking alls won't come back for more staring contests. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up, kinda like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared. BC, I know animals can pick up on that shit, and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying, slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like the shadow of a person behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes naked watching this door away. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I fucking checked every corner too. But there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in and I completely believed someone was outside my door. Edit, the accompanied by a shadow part was not a shadow figure. It was like the shadow you'd see if something was on the other side of a cracked door. I don't know if that makes the story less scary or what, but just wanted to be clear. I guess this isn't super scary, and I'd give it really fits, but it still weirds me out and my friends just think I'm crazy. Back when I was a freshman in college I went out with a friend of mine. He ended up dancing with some girl, so I went and grabbed a seat at the bar. Girl came up to me and bought me a drink because she liked my style and introduced herself as Sapphire. We chatted for at least an hour, had a few drinks, and at some point she said she had to leave. So I asked for her number and she scribbled it onto a bar napkin. But then we ended up chatting more and one thing led to another and she invited me to her apartment. We go there and start hooking up and she asks if I've ever tried acid and if I wanted to do some. I said sure. After it kicks in we go for a walk. We were talking about the constellations and space for a while, but then I noticed she got quiet. I had my eyes glued to the sky for the entire walk, so I look over. And she's gone. I freak out and start retracing my steps to get back to her place, yelling her name and checking bushes. My high ass assumed she was just peeing in a bush. Get back to her apartment, knock on the door, and some guy answers the door. Keep in mind this was like 4 AM at this point. Some guy answers and I ask if he knew Sapphire and described her. He said he had no clue who I was talking about and to just go home. So I did. I ended up crashing at a friend's place because my trip was going south and I knew he'd be able to calm me down. Next day comes and I'm still trying to figure out what happened to her. I call the number she gave me. It was disconnected. Went back to the apartment, same guy answers, still no idea what I'm talking about. Even knocked on some of the neighbors, and tried the same room location on different floors. Nothing. Talked to the security guy at the front desk, said he remembers me coming in a few times, but never saw me with a girl. Called up my friend who was at the bar with me and asked if he saw the girl I was with. He said he never saw me with a girl. According to him I was sitting at the bar alone for a bit, had a few drinks, and left after like 30 minutes. I have no idea who this woman was, or if she even existed, but I remember her so vividly I can't believe that I imagined it. She just vanished. I have no tangible proof of her existence. Freaks me out to this day that I spent an entire night with this person who didn't exist. I still don't know what happened that night. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5-8. I was in my babysitter bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 3 a.m. I had woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up, I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of the stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets trying to hide, and when I looked back she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 6 a.m. when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. Edit, since I never told anyone I'd Kiffy belongs here, but no one in my family believes in ghost. So if I were to tell them, I guarantee it'd be dismissed. Ghost story time. I was living with a few of my friends a year and a half ago, and we're all pretty religious. At least, 2 of us work in religion. We were talking about how we didn't believe in ghosts or demons, at least in the sense that we couldn't see them if they were real. We started talking about how if we saw one it would change our perspective entirely. I said out loud, if something is here, I wish it would just show us. 2 nights later I'm sound asleep and have the most vivid, brutal nightmare I've ever had. Long story short, I was in my childhood house. We were getting robbed, and the robber shot my father, only it was me. I was the robber. My father and I had a very strained relationship, and the detail of the shooting woke me up in tears. I mean, I was sobbing. I looked at the foot of my bed and saw a man sitting on his heels staring at me. It looked like he was 80 years old but never hit puberty. That's as best I can describe it. His face looked kind, but his eyes looked so wicked it struck terror into my soul. He almost looked curious, but morbidly so. He was wearing clothes that looked like he was a newspaper salesman from 1890s New York. I only saw him for a split second and he was gone. The wild thing is, I got all of that detail in just a split second, like he wanted me to remember him. Here's the crazy part. So I was spooked to shit, right? I went into our living room and watched YouTube and some Twitch streams for a bit until I convinced myself I was just half asleep and still spooked. I lay back in bed, and the moment my head hits the pillow, my roommate sits straight up in bed, still asleep, points at the foot of my bed and says, "my name, who is that?" I lost my goddamn mind. I literally drove home at 3 a.m. and told my parents through tears I wanted to stay home until summer. I stayed at home for a week or so and then went back. My roommate started having night terrors after that, but we moved soon after. I've never been so scared in all of my life. Edit, I've had question about my roommate's night terrors. The one I saw happened the first night I was back. Basically, we're both sound asleep and he wakes up screaming. I don't mean yelling, I mean screaming. It sounded like an animal in pain. For those of you who have been hunting before, he sounded like a deer screaming after being shot. I got down on the floor, he just slept on a mattress, and tried to calm him down, but we locked eyes and he started to try to climb over me, still screaming. He looked afraid, absolutely terrified. After 2 or 3 minutes he stopped all of a sudden, started mumbling and went back to sleep. I was holding his hands and our fingers were locked like when you wrestle, and I had bruises the next day because of how hard he squeezed. The next morning I asked him if he remembers waking up screaming, and he said, "No, but I had a crazy dream. You got down from your bed and started attacking me, but you were covered in this black sludge. Like your face was melting off, but it was this tar-like goo that smelled like decay." After that, 2 of my other roommates and I got together and prayed in our room. Nothing quite as bad happened after that. Some other less entertaining stuff happened, like couches being stripped of their cushions and things spilling in the middle of the night. One time a bottle of wine just fucking exploded out of nowhere and scared us to death. Thanks for the silver, was my first. Edit number 2. To be clear, I'm a seminary student and I work in ministry for high school students. Not exactly a youth pastor, but sort of. I don't believe in spiritual healings or anything like that. I'm much more naturalistic about my beliefs, but these things really happened. Whether it was a hallucination or genuine spiritual thing, I have no idea. I don't like to think about it.